The objection or the point I took him up on is that they were anything but mistakes, Big, that we've been experiencing in Port Orange for years.
In other words, he'd like to focus a little bit less on the problems, but the problems seem to be exacerbating in the city of Port Orange. As a matter of fact, you almost couldn't have written it this well, could you?
No, you couldn't make this stuff up. That is true.
Would you like to go through that list and just give us a slight, breakdown? And by the way, with us also is Mike, and you and Ted certainly are welcome to chime in each other. Mike's here with Ted as a co-conspirator.
I appreciate that, Big. I'm Mike Gardner. And
I was only going to use your first name, so we give you some anonymity.
We're not anonymous at all.
All right. You go to a lot of meetings too?
Everyone, since we had a similar problem to what Ted's talking about. We had something going on in our backyard and began approaching our city, what we thought were through normal channels, and ran into a bunch of obstacles that we really didn't think ought to be there. And since that time, which I guess it's going on 9 months to a year now, I think we've been to every city council meeting they've had.
Good.
Plus a lot of the board meetings.
And you're learning the lingo?
Learning the lingo, learning the characters.
Yeah. You gotta figure out why they are the way they are. What was the list? And Mike, if you want to chime in, that's okay with you, right, Ted?
Absolutely, Big. The list that you refer to in the email, I chose to start that in about 2006, because in 2006 we definitely had an open conflict between IT and information technology. Big is what IT.
Republican eavesdroppers got to be careful.
Yes, sir, and finance. Now that problem really blossomed, but it was never resolved. And what happened 6 years later was the fiasco. We had a complete collapse in internal control between IT and finance in the period after 2006 and up to 2012 when it could no longer be denied the problems they had.
Are you saying they had a spat?
A spat.
They didn't like each other?
That is correct. Very much so. Very much so in 2006.
And the manager didn't put an end to it?
He did not. He papered over the problem at that point in time, and it blossomed into the problem we had with the water billing in 2012. And the linkage is direct in my mind between the two things. And the real tragedy here, Big, is that while this may have been lost on council, and probably undoubtedly was lost on council, it wasn't lost on the manager, it wasn't lost on the finance director, it wasn't lost on the comptroller or the customer service manager. They were all aware of what they were doing.
Okay, and so they overlooked it. Did the mayor know what was going on?
I wouldn't know that for sure,
right.
But what I do know for sure is that he is imminently involved in an awful lot of what goes on in the city.
Covering up.
Involved.
We're spinning.
Involved for sure.
All right.
But whether he would pick up on the nuance of problems, control deficiencies between IT and finance, I, in fairness, couldn't say that.
All right, so we got to tell the Republican eavesdroppers. So what happened? They're having a spat between IT and finance, and in the spat, we did not bill for a whole bunch of water that we sent to the city of Daytona Beach Shores.
I don't think it's so much we didn't bill. We didn't bill at the correct rates.
Okay.
So it wasn't that we weren't sending a bill. We were simply sending an incorrect bill.
All right.
And, of course, the incorrectness of that bill was as a direct result of the failure in controls. In other words, we never had separation. We never had one person implementing rates and then running them, testing them, then locking them down once they were in place. We had one person who basically could do the whole job herself, and that is a control deficiency 101.
Okay.
And that went on for years.
All right. So that's item number one on your list?
Yeah, that's where I started the story.
Right.
Because
and that cost the taxpayers of Port Orange how much, roughly?
At least $1 million.
At least $1 million. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
The second thing that I put in this little list to the mayor, where I chided him that there were not mistakes, anything but, was for years and years and years.
And by the way, chide is one of those really odd, tricky words. It's a small word, but it's tricky. And then another more common word would be scold.
Correct. We had audit recommendations being made year in and year out that were never being adequately implemented. Now, that wasn't a mistake. That was a conscious decision on some people's parts to wink and nod at good procedures that they had no intention of implementing.
So is this the external auditor you're talking about? Or would this be an internal auditor?
Both. Primarily the external auditor, but there's no doubt about it, they did have probably 3 internal audits during this period as well, but primarily the external auditor.
So in the letter that the auditor always gives, these things were overlooked, or was it in the letter and just never worked on?
Never properly implemented.
Never implemented. Got it. Okay. All right. So the mayor said that you were wrong on that item as well?
Well, again, I don't know that he's ever said that I'm wrong, but he would certainly spin it different than I would.
All right.
And that, I think, is the main difference between he and I on all these subjects.
All right, so he's willing to say that the $1 million billing error, which was never collected, is that correct?
I think a portion of it was collected.
All right.
But even the gross amount of it, the calculation of it, got to be very iffy. I wouldn't have any confidence on any of these numbers that were ultimately disclosed in the paper.
So a fairly large sum of money was lost, and the taxpayers have to make it up if there's a shortfall. And the mayor would just like everybody to know that's just a little mistake.
That is correct. And this problem is ongoing here, too big, in that it frayed nerves, it frayed feelings, it frayed the goodwill between Port Orange and Daytona Beach shores.
Right.
And, of course, if you follow the news now, the shores and Daytona Beach are going in on a new sewer line.
Well, the chiseler, would be quick to jump on anything like this because he's a competitive guy and really doesn't care about anybody but himself. And so they are spending a lot of money to put a new line under the river.
That is correct. And then, by all indications, the shores is going to divert some of the sewage that they currently send to Port Orange via this new line. And that's really tragic that this snafu with water billings is perhaps, at least in part, responsible for this frayed relationship between Port Orange and the shores at this point. So it is ongoing. It
right,
is really,
so there'll be money being lost for a long time.
Yeah, to
new money.
New money potentially could be lost to Port Orange if they divert some or all of their sewage north to Daytona. That is correct.
Got it. All right, what's the next thing? And the mayor, of course, this was just a little mistake.
Yep. The next thing in my little list was I referenced a little payroll misunderstanding down in the utilities department, where some key people felt they could have their cake and eat it too, in that they were collecting double pay. The final number, I think, that was disclosed is roughly around $250,000, but it could have been considerably higher than that. And once again, Big,
are we sure that's the right number?
No, I would never have confidence in any of these numbers, because sometimes the stomach to disclose it all is just not there. And but again, that's portrayed as just a mistake, portrayed as a misunderstanding. I don't believe it is either of that.
Right. And was this is this where people were getting extra vacations? Is that item, or is this something different?
No, that's the extra vacation and or admin time, they called it.
Right.
Were one and the same.
I got it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Are we in the period when we're losing high-level bureaucrats yet, or is that yet to come?
I would think most of the high-level bureaucrats have left, that need to leave in Port Orange have left at this point.
Well, recently we've lost 6.
Yeah.
How much was it? We lost, the city manager retired early, the original one, Parker, and then this one left. You're not upset that this Kessler, or whatever his name is, you're not upset that he left? Not
in the least.
Okay. As I wouldn't be upset if Chisler were to get a wonderful job anywhere else but here, But anyway, you had 6 recently, very high-level people, and then you had